What's the most depraved thing you've seen someone do? Story 1. When I was about 18 or 19 years old, I had a male roommate, someone I'd only been an acquaintance with back in high school. I was renting a room in his big 5-bedroom house that his mom had left him. Since we worked different schedules, I barely saw him at home. One evening, I was hanging out in my room, which was actually the entire basement level. It was really nice for just $300 per month, complete with a fireplace and a sliding glass door that opened to the backyard. I was lying in bed with my door locked when I suddenly heard a loud thud against it. It startled me. It was insanely loud, and when I looked over, I saw the shadow of someone standing outside in the hallway. I could see their feet under the door. I nervously called out, "Who is it?" But there was no response, just more violent knocking. I had a boyfriend at the time, so I tried to convince myself it was maybe just him showing up unannounced and trying to be funny. But the knocks kept escalating into loud pounding, and I shouted again, "Who is it? What the heck are you doing?" That's when the pounding changed into a very loud cracking sound. My heart was racing. I grabbed the nearest heavy object, a large vase, and stood there in my pajamas, just shorts and a tank top, as it was summer, preparing myself for action. Then, part of my crappy wooden door shattered and fell onto my floor. A metal object came through the hole. I watched in disbelief as it was pulled out and then slammed back into the door again. At that point, I grabbed my phone, dropped the vase, and ran out through the sliding glass door into the backyard. In hindsight, I definitely should have done it that way earlier. I hid in the bushes, peeking in through the glass to see what was happening. A few minutes later, I saw my roommate, who had always seemed calm, nice, and easygoing, standing in my room with a literal axe in his hand. I stayed hidden as I watched him rage around, tearing my room apart, rifling through drawers, and throwing my stuff everywhere. If there hadn't been an axe involved, I probably would have been dumb enough to confront him. Also, yeah, I absolutely should have called 911, but I didn't. No clue why. Eventually, it looked like he was leaving my room, but then he turned and walked up to the sliding glass door. I swear he made eye contact with me, or at least I thought he did. I started to dial 911, thinking he'd seen me. My heart was frozen in fear. He then raised the axe and slammed it into the glass. It shattered after a few hits. I screamed, thinking he was about to come for me, but I think the sound of the glass breaking drowned out my scream. Thankfully, he turned around and walked away instead. I stayed outside, terrified and unsure of what to do next. After about 10 minutes of silence, I finally ran back inside, barefoot, stepping on broken glass, which honestly didn't even register at that point. I grabbed my keys and purse, which still had $600 in cash untouched, and ran to my car. My bedroom door looked like a scene straight out of The Shining. I sped straight to my parents' house. The next day, my mom called some of her police officer friends to go with me so I could collect the rest of my stuff. I did see my roommate, and only because the cops were with me, I asked, "What the heck happened to my room?" He just shrugged and said, "Oh, I had a party yesterday. Someone must have broken in and stolen your stuff." I was like, "Yeah, you did. I watched you do it." He just shook his head and walked away. After checking my room, I realized more than 10 pairs of my underwear were missing, along with my laptop, and, oddly, one of my toys. I didn't even know what to say at that point. I didn't ask for any of it back. Honestly, I was just grateful to be out of there alive. The laptop was a brick anyway, and I desperately needed a new one. I never returned after that, but a few months later, while working for an attorney, I came across his name again. He'd been arrested for possession of drugs, stalking, S-aiding, and eventually offing someone, another woman. I told my boss what had happened to me, and the case was transferred to another public defender. He's now serving a life sentence in prison. Before we continue, do us a quick favor. Smash that like button and subscribe to support our channel. Story 2. I worked at a plus-size women's clothing store, Lane Bryant, and we had a male customer ask for the dressing room to try on some of the shirts. We're not allowed to deny anyone a dressing room, so we let him have one. 10 minutes later, I saw him rushing out the door, and when we went into the dressing room, we saw at least 10 pairs of underwear in a pile on the floor, covered in his baby gravy. We thought he stashed them in the pockets of the clothes or something, and that's how he got them in there. Story 3. I was teaching English in a small village in Italy. Short contract, 2 weeks. The company set us up with host families, which are families who give you a room for free and feed you, and I guess that their kid goes to school for free in return or something along those lines. So, anyway, I wake up around 6 p.m. from a siesta, walk downstairs to get some water. I see the teenage daughter lying on the sofa, getting her honeypot licked by the family dog making noises in Italian. It was some kind of massive wolf-like breed of dog, like probably a husky or something. I don't know, didn't really notice. I think that's probably the most depraved thing I've seen with my own eyes. The woman I was staying with was a professional dog trainer. She had 2 of these massive hounds. They were the most perfectly behaved dogs I'd ever met. Silent, perfectly obedient. They could have ripped me to shreds in seconds, but they just nuzzled my hand every now and then. She was good-looking, had loads of tattoos, had a 1-week-old baby. I remember she came to pick me up from the station, and this baby was chilling in the back seat. She told me that this baby was 1 week old, and I was thinking, is now really a good time for me to stay? Then I noticed she was driving with one hand on the wheel and smoking a cigarette. She was really down to earth, though, a really trustworthy, kind, intelligent woman. She lived in this old farmhouse with her other sons and her husband. They grew corn, but there was other income from somewhere or other because the place was really nice. My guess is that he was rich as heck, like had a wealthy family or whatever, because there was a second farmhouse built next to the one they lived in, and her extended family lived in there, like grandparents, loads of uncles and cousins. So, now you know more context. I can explain that whatever happened wasn't actually the daughter, she was the cousin, teenage girl. I met her a few times. She liked the newborn baby. Holding him, I guess, looking at his tiny fingers, and feeling maternal. We had a few slow-paced interactions, mostly being translated by the mom. She was a nice kid. On the day in question, I woke up because I heard the car leaving the driveway. I go down looking for water, dehydrated as heck. Those summer schools are a freaking boot camp for young teachers. They work you hard. I was tired and disoriented, and didn't know what to expect. I guess that the mum had been called out while the cousin was in her house, and just told her it was fine to chill there and play with the dog. I wander through the living area and see her with this huge dog. My God, man, the fear that that image gave me. Next, she notices me and makes eye contact. I say "Sheo," and just walk off like this is the most normal, everyday situation. I go up to my crappy little room and I'm shook, paranoid big time. I'm imagining that she's not gonna deal with the shame. Maybe go back and tell the family I tried to SA her. Next thing I know, there'll be 4 big muscly Italian uncles ready to chop me into pastrami. That didn't happen. I did meet her again. She just said "Sheo." Story 4. In 2004, I worked for Turning Stone Resort Casino, and one Friday night, I was leaving to go home, and I walked across the casino floor, and out of the corner of my right eye, I heard and saw 2 very intoxicated businessmen, one of which was crying and on his phone, while seated turned around, from a blackjack table. I heard him say, "Honey, I have something to tell you. I lost the house. I screwed up. This is really bad. I lost $200,000. His tears rolled from his eyes. It was heartbreaking. I also watched a Middle Eastern man sit at the high-stakes pit and betting a $500 hand twice, lose $20,000. That's right, 20 hands in a row he lost. I watched him get another marker for $20,000, and now this time, he was shaking uncontrollably with anger. Once again, he lost another 20 hands in a row. I watched him self-implode right before me. On Friday night, I would always leave and take a mental note of who was sitting at the high-stakes table, so that on Monday, when I came back to work, I would see who was still there, and who crapped themselves because they didn't want to leave their seat. Story 5. I used to work at a restaurant that served prime rib on Mondays. It was a pretty good deal, prime rib made fresh that day, plus salad and a potato, all for $14.99, at least back then. I was usually a cook or prep, but I started out as a busboy, and one day they asked if I wanted to pick up an extra shift. I liked to smoke and needed the cash, so I said sure. So, I'm bussing tables while the server is talking to a table and holding some dishes. I go to grab them from her and start walking toward the back of the restaurant to drop them off. On my way, this couple, probably in their 40s or 50s, stops me. The husband asks for silverware. I tell him, "Sure, sir, just give me a second to put these down, and I'll grab some for you." Apparently, that wasn't fast enough for him. He gets all uptight and snaps. "No, I need them now." I try to reassure him. "Sir, it'll take me less than 20 seconds, but he wasn't having it. Meanwhile, his wife is giving him the "please don't do this" look. And then in full meltdown mode, this guy says, "I need to eat my food now," grabs a dirty fork off a plate someone else had already eaten from, and just starts chowing down like it's nothing. I looked at his wife, said sorry, and just walked away. There was no saving that situation. Anyone who's worked in restaurants knows that while dishwashers use high-powered machines and sprayers, it's not a sterile operating room back there. Stuff gets reused, and things aren't always spotless. Watching that guy eat off someone else's dirty fork was honestly disgusting. I've seen some wild things working in vet med since then, but that moment still stands out. Story 6. An ex-girlfriend of mine had a friend whose cat had just given birth to a litter of kittens. The guy was an addict and a real piece of crap. He didn't want to deal with the kittens, so he put all of them in a large, oversized red trash can and would throw leftover food in there for them to eat. He was trying to sell the kittens, but no one was taking him up on the offer. We were at a party at this guy's place, shortly after hearing about the kittens, and my ex and I were actually considering adopting 2 of them to live with us. While we were talking about this, we suddenly heard the guy and several of his friends laughing about something before they all rushed outside with the red trash can. The guy who owned the kittens got into his Mustang and started driving around the apartment complex. We were watching from the 3rd-story balcony of his apartment. As he came back around at about 40 mph, one of the other guys took a kitten out of the trash can and threw it out in front of the car. Almost everyone upstairs was immediately horrified. Several of us ran downstairs to try to stop what was happening. By the time we reached the bottom floor, they were already on kitten number 3. People from both the balcony and the ground floor were screaming at them to stop. The guy holding the trash can saw the crowd forming, laughed again, and then dumped the entire trash can full of kittens onto the street in front of the Mustang. A good Samaritan tried to grab the trash can, but someone pulled them out of the way just in time. We all watched in horror as the Mustang ran over. The Good Samaritan rushed over to check for any survivors but immediately recoiled after looking inside and ran to a nearby bush to throw up. My ex was absolutely devastated. She didn't say a word during the entire ride home and cried the whole way. After we left, things apparently escalated between the people who had offed the kittens and the rest of the party guests. A fight broke out, and several people ended up getting hurt. Thankfully, no one died, and the guy in the Mustang, along with 1 or 2 of his friends, was arrested. The whole situation was an absolute nightmare. Story 7. There was this one guy, a complete creep, who apparently used to store his juice in a jar before coming in. He'd then walk around the store and randomly toss it at employees or customers. Thankfully, I never got hit, but he did it 3 separate times before they finally arrested him. No idea how it even took that long. Then there was this other regular who gave off major deranged vibes. He'd hang around the greeting card aisle, claiming he was illiterate, and would ask women to read cards to him, while casually trying to diddle one out through a hole he had cut in his pants pocket. And there was also this dude who would regularly crap his pants and shake the poop log out through the bottom of his pant leg, and somehow he was the least of our problems. Retail really throws everything at you. Story 8. I used to work at a nicer Mexican restaurant that was known for serving these absolutely massive burritos, like football-sized, no exaggeration. One night, a group came in celebrating a guy's 21st birthday. Everyone was already a few drinks in, and the birthday guy decided he was going to take on one of these monstrous burritos solo. To everyone's amazement, he actually managed to finish the whole thing. But then, right after swallowing the last bite, he leaned over and violently puked the entire thing right back onto his plate. It was just this steaming, half-digested burrito mess. Instead of reacting with horror, his friends started chanting, "Eat it, eat it." And to my absolute disbelief, he did. He actually started eating it again. What's worse, the guy sitting next to him even took a couple of bites, too, probably just trying to one-up him or prove a point. I've seen some gross stuff while working in food service, but that night still haunts me. Story 9. When I was in middle school, my basketball team used to carpool to games. One night, after an away game, we were all crammed into a teammate's car, driving back home. We pulled up to a red light, and out of nowhere, the parent driving blurted out, "Nobody look to the left." Of course, being a bunch of curious middle school boys, we all immediately turned our heads to the left like synchronized idiots. And there he was, a completely bare man standing on the sidewalk, aggressively and repeatedly shoving a huge spoon in and out of his back door. The silence in the car afterward was deafening. No jokes, no comments, not even awkward laughter, just pure psychological damage. It's been over a decade, and that mental image is still burned into my brain like it happened yesterday. Story 10. I worked security at a nightclub in the late 90s. It was a multi-tiered spot with a concert venue and a nightclub that sometimes had wildly different crowds. The night this incident happened, we had an 80s-themed night in the club and a punk rock show in the venue. I got called to the women's bathroom in the club part, which was never a good thing. There was a girl in there, passed out on the toilet, popped all over and puked all over herself. So, I had to carry her out. I get her to the back staircase and sit her down. She's babbling, but I can't understand anything. After a short time, this guy comes outside and claims to be her boyfriend and wants to take her home. He says she drank too much. The girl is a pretty young white girl, and the dude is a fat mid-30s Middle Eastern-looking guy. Something was off. We were trying to find her ID, that says, but her pants were still all tangled up. Her keys fell out, and one of the other bouncers picked them up. The guy immediately tries to claim them, saying they're from his car. My coworker asked him what kind of car it is. Before he can answer, another girl starts screaming behind us, "Holy crap, what happened?" I start to tell her what has happened to her friend, and that the boyfriend wants to take her home. What boyfriend? The guy immediately runs down an alley away from us. We caught him, but instead of calling the police, we told some of the punks I knew that were there what he had done. They took him and kicked the crap out of him and dropped him in a dumpster. Story 11. Drunk guy at a party claimed he could drink anything, saying, "If everyone spits in a cup, I could even drink that." Someone took him up on it, went around the party collecting spit, beer foam, cigarette butts, and one guy even peed a little in the cup. The drunk guy actually drank it, then promptly puked everywhere. And when I worked at a hotel years ago, we hosted a wine tasting event with over 200 attendees. Each winery had a spit bucket for guests to taste and spit out the wine. At the end of the shift, I was clearing the buckets at the dish pit. I had a cart with 5 8-liter spittoons, each half full. One of the dish pit guys, I'll call him Kevin, stopped me from dumping them, saying it was perfectly good wine. He filled 3 empty wine bottles and took them home. The next day, the other dish pit guy, who had hung out with Kevin that night, told me Kevin drank half a bottle of the spit wine, puked all over his living room, then drank another bottle and puked again. I guess he was smart enough to throw away the last 2 bottles after that. Story 12. Back in college, my friend was having a party at his house, and he invited a bunch of people, including some sorority girls. One of the sorority girls got incredibly drunk, stood up on the coffee table in the living room, and used the neck of a glass bottle. She soloed off with it for several minutes in front of at least a dozen people. I went and found my friend and let him know what was happening, and he communicated it to one of her sorority sisters, who went and put a stop to it. Don't think that girl ever lived it down, as some people had taken videos of it, and the videos started circulating. I felt really bad for her. Story 13. When I was 17, I went to the gathering of the Juggalos. While there, we met an older woman in what I can only describe as an extremely dirty ballet tutu bodysuit thing. She had an accent and told us she is from Puerto Rico, and that she escaped a drug cartel that she was sold into when she was very young. She told us how she was forced to marry her captor, and how he used her as an S-worker for his friends for 18 years. After escaping, she got hit by a construction truck and spent 2 years in a body cast. Apparently, after she recovered, she found herself homeless and walking down the side of the highway, stopping at truck stops and doing it with anyone who would let her. Apparently, she felt that by giving her body away for free, she felt she was breaking the chains that man had placed on her all those years ago. She said a car full of Juggalos passed by her, turned around, and offered to bring her to the gathering. She told us this story while having a train of Juggalos take her from behind next to the drug bridge. At least 20 guys went. And when we left, she was on the move, getting as many as she could. I saw a younger guy raw Scooby-Doo her. He told everyone he was a virgin. He went after the 84-year-old Chinese guy who just finished before him. I'll never forget you, nameless cartel lady. And no, I did not touch her. Story 14. My former boss was very wealthy, but his best friend, let's call him Ralph, was a big-time moocher. No one liked the best friend because he took advantage of our boss. One time, the entire back office went to a high-end sushi restaurant, and Ralph happened to glom on. Our boss picked up the tab but simply asked that we all chip in for the tip, which we all did in cash. What we later discovered was that the tip was very light. Ralph went back into the restaurant for his sunglasses and stole $200 in cash from the tip on the table. He denied it, but everyone knew it was true. Real scumbag, stealing from the waitress, who he claimed didn't really need the money. Story 15. I was in DTLA walking to an office from Union Station. As I was crossing the fast-track off-ramp, there was a homeless guy sitting on the corner with a sign. A big brand-new Mercedes S65 AMG pulled up and rolled down its windows. The man sitting in the passenger side threw a water bottle and Lay's chips at the homeless man's face. The homeless man didn't even care. The minute the items hit the ground, he moved quickly and started scarfing down the chips and drinking the water so quickly that it was spilling from the sides of his mouth. Before they drove off, the passenger spit in the homeless man's face and laughed and looked at me with a smirk and a smug look on his face, and the driver peeled off into oncoming traffic. The whole interaction couldn't have been any more than 20 to 30 seconds max, but every day when I get off that freeway, I remember that experience. People can be so cruel. Story 16. I used to haul us mail in a semi, running routes from Kalamazoo, Michigan, to Detroit. One night I got caught up in a nasty traffic jam on I-94 right as I hit Ann Arbor. There had been an accident, so I jumped off and detoured onto 14, then picked up I-96 to make sure I wasn't late for my drop at the downtown post office. As I was driving eastbound, I heard a westbound Canadian truck driver on the CB losing his mind, cussing out some driver in a little S10 pickup that was heading the same direction he was. Next thing I know, I see this massive rig deliberately run the S10 off the road, and the guy on the CB just starts laughing like it was funny. I watched the entire thing happen from the opposite side of the highway. The pickup rolled 5 or 6 times down the embankment. It was raining like crazy, but I didn't even hesitate. I pulled over, and another driver behind me followed suit. We both jumped out and ran over to the crash. When I got to the S10, I saw the driver was a young woman. She was badly injured. Blood all over the cab, barely conscious. It was a mess. I didn't have cell service in that area. It's out in the sticks between 14 and 96, so I told the other driver to try calling 911 if he could get a signal. I stayed with her the whole time, trying to keep her awake and alert while we waited for emergency responders. I couldn't tell the full extent of her injuries, but it was bad. Like, really bad. I still think about it sometimes. Story 17. I was at a warehouse loft party in downtown San Francisco. We went out on the fire escape to smoke cigarettes at maybe 3:30 a.m. There were these 2 vagrant street urchin guys below smoking. They started to make out, take their clothes off, and then, fully unclothed, one of them started giving the other one a blowy. The guy whose loft it was saw them and yelled, "Hey, I told you guys not to do that here." He went inside, grabbed a full 5-gallon bucket of ice water, came back to the fire escape and poured it on the 2 cracked-out dudes. They immediately ran in opposite directions, into the alleyways, a half block from Market Street, leaving all of their clothes and shoes fully unclothed, and didn't come back. I was there a few days later, and there were still 2 wet piles of clothes and some powder in the same spot. Story 18. I used to work at a magazine store. Just a normal one which also had an adults-only section. I haven't seen a magazine in years, but in those days it used to have a plastic cover that would hide the entire magazine, apart from the name of the magazine. One day, as I was walking around the store, I saw one smartly dressed gentleman licking the cover of a magazine, really going at it. The magazine was still in its plastic cover, and all you could see was the brand name. Also, I went to dinner with another couple at Chili's, and we were looking at the menu, when all of a sudden, the guy licked the Chili's laminated menu. It was a very disturbing moment to witness. I never dined with them again. Story 19. This is something I witnessed in person. My aunt had this idea that she was going to make some extra money by buying a bunch of roses from a connection she had, and selling them at intersections around Indianapolis for Valentine's Day. She recruited me to help out, and promptly sent me to one of the more run-down areas in town. I set up in an abandoned parking lot and started selling my florist-rejected flowers. At one point, I noticed a teenage girl, I guess, walk out from an alley diagonally across the intersection from me. She was carrying a baby with her with nothing on but a onesie in the cold, rainy February evening. She stopped to light a cigarette and started giving the baby drags off it. I yelled at her, and she just flipped me off and sauntered back into the alley. Story 20. I used to work at a small grocery store in a town that had a decently sized concert venue or a campground. Needless to say, every summer was a constant parade of drunk girls in bikini tops with smells of grasses all over, and people who lost their shoes in the river. This incident was witnessed after the fact on the security tapes. One night, as the manager and I were in the back room closing up, a guy managed to jimmy open the locked front door. He completely failed to find the restroom he was looking for 15 to the left, despite the clear signage, and proceeded to the produce section. There he climbed aboard a cart-shaped display full of iceberg lettuce, took off his pants, threw them on the floor and pooped on the lettuce. When he was done, he reclaimed his trousers and walked right back out the door. When the manager and I did our final walkthrough, 5 minutes later, we smelled his deposit long before we found it. After checking the tape, we notified the store manager that we'd be staying late to clean it up and rebuild a lettuce display. The next day, the store manager gave both of us $100 and had upgraded door locks installed. Story 21. My uncle and his wife, who my granddad despised, stole my granddad's cigarettes from his pocket while he was on his dying bed while he slept. Everyone, including him, basically knew he wasn't going to make it through the night. When he woke up, he just wanted a cigarette, but the nurse explained to everyone how his son had taken them. My mother went in search of a cigarette for him, but by the time she got back, he had passed away. He had smoked his entire life, and just wanted that last one before he passed. He died without getting that final smoke he'd asked for. It might seem like a small thing to some people, but knowing how much it meant to him, and how that moment was taken from him by his own son, still hits hard. Story 22. I was working at a grocery store during the pandemic to make ends meet. A store 45 minutes from a place I shared with my ex in a crappy part of town. I never closed except for one night. And an hour before closing, I was told I could go home a bit early because everything was done. My ex was a very selfish person, for many reasons, but in our part of town with very little parking, while she was home all day, she didn't bother to move her car from our one parking spot, and I had to drive around the neighborhood at 9 p.m. for blocks, looking for a spot with flowers I bought for her in my passenger seat. I'm driving down a main street, approaching an intersection, when I see people at a bus stop in the distance. One person is limp, while the other two carry them, so I thought, ha, drunk. I got to the light to make a left into another neighborhood, while still looking for parking, and while I turned, I noticed it was two men holding up a woman who they had aid while unconscious. I immediately called the police to report it, and once I hung up, less than a minute later, I started screaming and pounding on my steering wheel out of frustration. I knew I couldn't wait. I knew they were going to take her somewhere darker, and who knows what would happen when they got her there. I flipped around to go back to the corner, and sure enough, they were gone. I turned down the closest street to look for them. The street lights were either busted or weak, so everything was dark. But I found them, one holding her up while the other ate her. I lived in a violent, gang-heavy area where people being offed was a regularity. I'm not a big guy, nor was I armed. I knew trying to engage would just get me to expire. So instead, I pulled up on them, tires screeching, high beams on, music blasting with windows down, and I just started screaming at them, calling them names, flipping them off, anything I can think of to piss them off and get them to turn their attention on me. They drop her and start coming toward me. Seconds later, the police pull up and arrest both men as well as a third, who was watching from the bushes, waiting for his turn, as the detective put it. What bugs me the most is that I was one of two people who called the police and the only person who tried to do anything to stop it. And when I testified, my ex called me selfish for putting her life in danger to be a white knight. Oh, and that I still had to find parking after looking for 30 minutes and then walk blocks with my adrenaline up, holding a bouquet for this jerk of a woman. Story 23. Some years ago, I was working security at a shipping center. Nothing crazy. I was just sitting outside the facility at night. Well, one night, a truck comes into the lot, so I moved to intercept it. I roll down my window and the guy in the truck rolls his down. He was in his truck with a younger girl, so I say to him, "Hey, you can be here. I'm going to have to ask you to leave." And it was the funniest excuse I heard. He was like, "I'm sorry, my daughter and I were looking for a dark parking lot to He then trailed off, realizing what he was saying. Then he and his daughter left. To this day, I still think it was an S-worker in his car. I mean, really, why would you at 3 a.m. look for a dark, out-of-the-way parking lot with your daughter? Story 24. I worked graveyards in college at a gas station that was adjacent to one of the main dancer strolls in town. The manager made a point when I was hired of telling me that the guy I was replacing was fired for being a little too friendly with the working girls, up to the point where one of them robbed the place and he was pretty sure the guy was complicit. Anyways, the whole place was on CCTV, and having seen a few of the local pros, I was in no way interested in repeating my predecessor's mistakes. Most of the pros were nice enough, and a few would even check in between dates just to chat or get a coffee. There were definitely exceptions though. One night, a local working girl who had always been a bit of a shoplifting concern came into the store in bicycle shorts and a tube top and asked for a pack of smokes. I turn around to get them, and as I turn back, she's making aggressive eye contact with me and rummaging in her shorts. She then withdraws a fistful of limp, soggy bills that drop on the counter with an audible plop. I'm pretty sure I was almost catatonic from the smell alone, but as I stood there transfixed in horror, she says in a loud voice slurred by whatever she was on and all of the teeth she was missing, "Guess where that came from?" "Your shorts?" I offered timidly, still utterly dumbstruck by the smell. "From inside me," she yelled triumphantly. I snapped out of it at that point, and told her in no uncertain terms that there was no way I was handling that cash, and told her to get the heck out of the store. She wadded up the bills and reinserted them, then walked outside and right into the open passenger door of a car that stopped for her the moment she was streetside. I spent the rest of the night in rubber gloves and a mask scrubbing the countertop with any cleaning product I could find. Probably lucky I didn't mustard gas myself accidentally. If it hadn't been a gas station, I probably would have started with fire. Story 25. When I was living in an apartment complex a few years ago, something happened that I'll never forget. It was a quiet afternoon when I heard a frantic knock on my door. It was my neighbor's friend's girlfriend, and she was in full panic mode, practically dragging me out before I could even ask what was going on. She leads me down the hall, and as we turn the corner, my neighbor, whom I had spoken to maybe a handful of times before, comes out of his apartment. He's holding a blood-soaked butcher knife, staring at us with this cold, empty look. I froze. For a second, none of us moved, and then he bolted to his car and took off. We went into his apartment, and I swear I'll never forget what I saw. His friend, the girlfriend's boyfriend, was lying on the couch, barely conscious, completely covered in wounds. Blood was pouring out of him like a horror movie. It was absolutely horrific. I rushed her back to my place, locked the doors, and called 911. The wait for the police felt like forever. Later that day, I happened to be stepping out again when a woman with 2 kids showed up. She asked what was going on, and said she was bringing her children to see their dad. I didn't know how to respond, but I gently brought her over to where the police were. The moment she realized what had happened, she just collapsed right there on the pavement. Turns out, the man I saw die earlier that day was their father. To this day, I don't fully know what triggered my neighbor to do it. It still haunts me. I don't know where this falls on everyone else's depravity scale, but it bothers me to this day, both that it happened and that I couldn't think of the right thing to do in that moment. Story 26. One day, my younger sister and I went out to eat at a diner. Towards the end of the meal, she told me that she had to use the bathroom. She was gone for a longer than usual time. She finally came back and we finished eating, which wasn't very long. I paid for the food and told her that I had to use the bathroom before we left. I went into the bathroom and opened the door to the first stall. There was poop smeared everywhere, all over the walls and the toilet. Poop-covered paper was also everywhere. I was absolutely appalled and disgusted. It looked like a kid went to town and finger-painted with turd. I left the bathroom and told my sister about it. She was also shocked and disgusted by it. I found out years later that she was the one who did it. I no longer have anything to do with her, not because of the poop painting incident, but a myriad of jerk behavior including stealing my identity and going on a shopping spree. At my old job, they had to send out a mass email because someone in the ladies' restroom had a habit of smearing their period blood all over a stall and sticking their used pad onto the wall. It was a big building with about 7 men's and 7 women's restrooms and hundreds of employees. And in the men's room, someone had the habit of taking a massive poop, wiping, and leaving the dirty toilet paper all over the stall they were in. They wouldn't flush it, just left it on the floor. Story 27. A colleague and I were first on the scene of a fatal hit-and-run in Manchester a few weeks ago. While we were trying to give the victim first aid, or more accurately panicking, knowing our first aid ability was completely inadequate, a lady was standing by us filming everything on her phone. I'm still completely traumatized by it, and all I can think of is this absolute jerk of a woman filming, while a 22-year-old girl lay dying on the road. Something about just standing around filming someone actively dying is probably the most depraved thing one could ever do. Like, how can you stand around and not help and then film it? It's incomprehensible to me. Another time, a kid passed in a car accident in a town close to mine, a small town, tight community. All-star football player, good grades, and community service. He was a great kid. Someone got to the scene before the police and took a video of the crash and made sure to focus in on the stump where his head should be and his brain on the dashboard. What the heck compels people to do that? I grew up in a small town as well and moved abroad. My brother passed in a car accident in 2012. I found out about his passing through Facebook because people posted pictures of him on the side of the road. Story 28. I once ended up at a completely deranged drinking session with a bunch of Marines, and let me just say, those guys are absolutely sick in the head. To avoid constantly going upstairs to use the bathroom, someone had the brilliant idea to set up a slop bucket. It was meant for pissing in and throwing up, and by the time things really got going, the bucket was about half full with everything that came out of their body. At one point, someone accidentally poured half a drink into the bucket. Instead of letting it go, one of the Marines shouted that it was a waste of good alcohol. The next thing I know, they were passing the damn thing around, doing shots straight from the slop bucket that was filled with piss, vomit, and a splash of beer. Still ranks as one of the worst, most revolting things I've ever seen in my life. Story 29. Once, I went to a village with my friend. Basically, in my country, some villages don't actually follow the laws of the government. They handle it on their own, and the villages have their own committee of law and decision-makers by the villagers' choice. So, they caught a guy essaying a girl in wheat farms. They immediately tied him to a tree, and all the men of the village gathered to see his punishment. A guy comes with a machete and chops the abuser's dong and sacks in one strike. The guy was screaming. They then fed his parts to the fish in the river. He remained alive in the end, and it's been 4 years since I saw this incident happen. Justice was served. Story 30. I was in a city called Varanasi in India, where they do open-air cremations and pour their ashes into the river. I, being a British backpacker, stumbled across one such site whilst walking home from a city tour. There's this local kid who can be more than 8 years old flying his kite nearby over the river. His kite crashes into the water. He reels it in, and it's soaking wet but intact, made of some kind of paper. He walks past a grieving family watching a cremation where the family couldn't have had as much money as the woodpile doesn't span the whole body. The legs are hanging off the end like he's sat on a sofa. The kid walks up between the man's legs in front of the whole family and starts drying his kite out over the funeral fire, literally in the middle of a cremation ritual. A minute or so later, the legs fall off due to the body breaking down. The kid is unfazed even as someone walks up, picks up the detached part and puts it back into the fire. He continues to hold out the kite until it's dry. A chunk of meat fell off as he was walking away and a dog ran off with it, chomping away. I almost lost my lunch and have never seen anything so disturbing in my entire life. I don't even know how the kid could handle being so close to the fire as it was hot enough to burn away a corpse. Story 31. Back around 2002, I went to pick up my girlfriend from work. She worked at a residential facility that supported mentally disabled adults, helping them with daily routines, job placements, and general life management. I showed up at the house where she worked, which also happened to be where many of the individuals lived. One of the residents, let's call her Gail, was a short, round woman in her late 40s, who always had this mischievous grin. That day, I learned exactly what that grin was about. As my girlfriend and I were saying goodbye to her boss, Gail suddenly marched out of the bathroom, holding a forearm-sized turd, like she was holding a trophy. Still smiling, she loudly declared, "You want to see this hit the fan?" Then, without hesitation, she underhanded the damn thing directly into the living room ceiling fan, which was spinning at full speed. The turd hit the blades and exploded across the room, on the walls, the furniture, and unfortunately, on all of us. To this day, I still gag thinking about the smell. Absolute nightmare fuel. Story 32. A guy was trying to steal stuff from cars at a club, and my kid was just chilling outside, and saw the guy, and asked him to stop looking in the cars. The perp was a career criminal. He attacked my son, and had to be rushed to the hospital. The guy was out on bail before my kid was out of the ICU. He has previously been charged with murder, burglary, assault, and a bunch of other stuff. There was zero reason for that dude to attack my kid. He's okay now. He went back to work after 8 weeks. We have no idea if the perp will be prosecuted. There is a video, but it's inconclusive if my kid did anything because his back was to the camera, and the perp is standing in front of him, so you can see the stabbing. But my son only asked the perp to move along. There are actual witnesses, including my son-in-law, who confirmed the other witness accounts. It was the night before my youngest got married, and my son was supposed to give her away. The perp ruined what should have been my daughter's happiest day. The wedding went on, but no one was really in a good mood. It's just a nightmare for a mom. Story 33. I was a teenager running a 5K fundraiser. Before it even started, I noticed a guy who was dressed unusually. He was wearing one of those tight fishnet shirts from the 80s and black short shorts. He looked like a discount Rocky Balboa. As the race commenced, he started making sounds like he was struggling almost immediately, like the tail end of a marathon sounds. My group was right behind him, and I was keeping an eye because I was intrigued. I noticed that his inner thighs were unusually hairy. Then I noticed that they seemed to be getting hairier. Then the grunting noises get more intense. Then the smell starts to spread, and everyone nearby notices. The dude ran the entire 3 miles with poopy pants and then sticks around like nothing is wrong. He's grabbing bottles of water, leaning against wooden fences at the park, leaving poop-filled butt prints in multiple spots. Finally, an old lady tries to help, telling him he should go home and giving him her jacket to wrap around his waist. He acted oblivious. To this day, I wonder what that was. Mental illness, or maybe he liked public humiliation. I'm leaning towards a combination of the two. Story 34. I was having breakfast at a coffee place, sitting at the high tables, looking out at the street in San Diego. On a nice sunny day, a homeless man comes by, picking up trash. Everything, cigarette butts, plastic cups, and whatnot. And unfortunately, he crams it all into a post box, not a trash can. You could see how happy he was for helping, while also totally strung out. A couple walks by with a little jerk for a dog. The dog craps in the little square around the trees, you know? And they don't pick it up, they just walk away. Here comes the homeless man, picking trash. We understood what was gonna happen, and we saw it all. The claw-shaped hand, reaching down, grabbing that poop, shoving it into the mailbox, wiping the hand on the pants, continuing to pick trash. We left immediately. It still haunts me. The heat. The postman. The post office. Urge. Untreated mental illness, poverty, and street drugs. Screw that. Story 35. I was taking a walk one evening and heard a loud crash. It sounded bad, so I went running towards the noise. By the time I got there, I saw two wrecked vehicles and a man leaning against a pickup truck bed in someone's driveway with about 10 to 15 people around him, just staring or filming. As I got closer, I saw that the bed of the truck and this man were covered in blood. He collapsed onto the ground, and I began doing what I could. I have EMT training, but I had nothing on me, gear-wise. I yelled for someone to call 911, which thankfully they did. I checked what vitals I could, really just his pulse and breathing, then went in his wallet to check his ID and get his name. I kept rubbing his sternum to keep him awake while calling his name, and everyone continued to stand around filming. The ambulance showed up relatively quickly, and I gave them all of the info I had and his wallet. I never did find out if he made it or not. His license was from out of state, so I'm not sure if he lived here or not. Turns out it was a drunk driver who hit him. I watched him get arrested, and everyone continued to film. I walked home covered in his blood, thinking about how screwed up it is that people can see someone in that state and do absolutely nothing but stare, or even worse, take out their phones to record. Story 36. My great-aunt passed away suddenly and unexpectedly. She was super sick, but not in a hospice. We were ready for her type of way. So, because of circumstances, my mom and I had to deal with it. So, we get to the house, and she's still in there as the police talk to us, trying to determine if it was a possible homicide or maybe she offed herself. The way her house was set up, you could see into the bedroom and see her sheeted feet sticking out. So my job was to keep my grandpa, her brother, from going near the front door. While I'm trying to handle that, her neighbor comes over. We were stuck waiting for the funeral home. My mom intercepts her at the door. I see her too late and head over to try to help. My mom very compassionately explains that yes, she had died. No one was allowed in the house until the will was opened and read. This neighbor absolutely straight-faced and seriously goes, "I had my china in her dishwasher. Can I get that back before all that red tape happens? Lady, your best friend is still dead in the house. You can see her tiny little feet, and you want your dishes." I thought that was something movies made up until it became real life. Also, why her dishwasher? So strange. So inappropriate. Story 37. I'm a teacher, and about a decade or so ago I had a student with severe trauma and some symptoms that I think will eventually be diagnosed as schizophrenia. His mom also had severe trauma, and likely PTSD. A lot of teachers were afraid of the kid because he had some serious violence in his past, but if you knew the story, he was trying to defend a family member from severe domestic violence. He was among the sweetest, most genuinely good kid I've ever met. Anyways, some scumbag took advantage of the situation and used the fact that the family was S-ake in the kid. I saw the person one time at the school before we knew what had happened, and I've never gotten a feeling like I got from that guy. It was like something in my gut told me I needed to get away from him and get him away from the school. I'm really glad I've never seen him again, as I'm genuinely not sure I wouldn't send him to the hospital, which wouldn't help my former student or me at this point. I know he was arrested, but I heard they dropped the case. I had no way to follow up and find out what happened. I think about that kid often, and really hope he's okay. He deserved so much better than the hand he was dealt. If you're out there, I'm proud of you, and I hope things have gotten better for you. Story 38. In my late teens, early 20s, a friend of mine introduced us to his new girlfriend. She was actually pretty cool and meshed well with our group. One night they both passed out in his room, and she wakes up completely disoriented. She couldn't find a light switch or door, so she just dropped a deuce in his bedroom floor, then crawled back in his bed. He woke me up the next morning asking what we should do. Before we could approach her, She jumped out of bed and ran to the bathroom. She bent down to throw up in the toilet and simultaneously dropped poop from behind. The most terrifying moment I've ever witnessed. Every time she heaved to throw up more, there was more back spray. After she was finished, she washed her hands and told him she had to head to work and left. She never apologized or even mentioned it. We never ran into her again after that. He didn't date anyone for almost 2 years after that. We laugh about it now, but for the longest time it was just a known thing we don't mention. It wasn't his fault, but he carried that guilt on his own for a long time. Story 39. I was a retail manager for a while years ago. We started getting emails about a guy who was going into the men's bathrooms and puking all over them. The amount of vomit was enough that they had to call a company to clean it up each time it happened, and it always happened in different locations. Well, the day came, and he finally hit my store, and man, I have never seen anything like it. I'll never get that image out of my head. You could make out the shape of the toilet, but literally couldn't see any porcelain. I pulled up the cameras because I was sure he made a fake vomit cocktail or something, though the smell should have been enough confirmation for me. Nope, tiny little dude strolls in no backpack or anything, goes straight to the bathroom, and then out he goes. Weirdest way I've ever heard of someone spending their free time. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss an update.